that here, I believe, at 6-0 at this point.
Yeah, so both of these players are at table 2, so they have great records coming into this round. I believe Hunter Butler actually has the deck that we were just talking about. And sure enough, there's their prizes being laid out. And Hunter Butler has the Garchomp and Giratina deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful cards, powerful effect, and just a lot of damage. On the other side, we see Kyle Warner playing Perfection, the deck we were just featuring on Pokemon Online, the Pokemon trading card game online. And of course, the Perfection deck just has so many different ways to attack. What's it going to use as its main damage source coming up against Garchomp and Giratina?
Well, I think this is probably a matchup that Kyle won't be too familiar with. Hunter's deck is definitely very unique, definitely not something he likely has tested against, so figuring out what to attack with is going to be something that Kyle's going to have to adjust and do pretty quickly here. Mega Lopunny could potentially be a good option depending on how many EXs or GXs Hunter puts into play. Of course, his own Garchomp and Giratina could be a very good option when combined with some Distortion Doors. And we see Hunter is getting his first turn moving right away using one of those nice League Cup promo Cherish Balls. Finds himself a Tapu Lele, has another Ultra Ball as well, and we already see him discard a Roxy right there. So we talked about how good Roxy Chomp is in the standard format. Looks like Hunter's made a little bit of an adaptation and brought it over here to Expanded.
You weren't kidding about the deck being pretty unique, right? As we see Hunter Butler actually start to look through his deck with that Ultra Ball and try to figure out what kind of deck or what kind of Pokemon he has and item cards he has prized in his 6 prizes. But at the same time, Kyle now getting the news that he's playing up against something that he probably didn't expect to play against coming into this weekend, and now no doubt trying to come up with a game plan as he watches Hunter take his first turn of the game, plays a Floatstone onto the active Pokemon before playing an N, now shuffling both players' hands back into their decks and drawing 6 new cards, as neither player has taken any prizes, of course.
Yeah, not the best turn, I would say, from Hunter right now. I feel like usually on turn 1, you want to be playing something like a Professor Juniper or maybe even a Roxy with his deck to draw a bunch of cards and build up a large hand. But he did get down that Garchomp and Giratina. Is certainly going to be looking for a double Dragon Energy, and that's one of the big cards that Garchomp and Giratina does gain in the expanded format that it doesn't have access to right now in Standard.
Okay, so now Kyle does begin his first turn of the game, and, well, actually, it looks like maybe he was just drawing for the end?
Yeah, I think they're just drawing off of the end. Hunter did find one of those double Dragon Energies, so we'll see if he decides to put that down. We also see a Faba in his hand. Could be a useful card. Of course, Kyle's Mewtwo and Mew deck is very reliant on special energy, so Faba discarding those energies could be brutal, sending them to the Lost Zone, I should say. And Chaotic Swell comes into play. Not a stadium we've seen too much of here in Expanded. It's very powerful in Standard right now. Yeah, Hunter, did he get the news that it was Expanded? Did he just decide to bring his Standard deck? It looks like he's mixing some things up here for sure. Very unique deck list.
Well, there's a Field Blower out of Kyle, and that Battle Compressor is going to give Hunter the news that he's now playing Expanded, as you now get to see the power of these item cards, the power of the expanded format, really, as these item cards really do make or break your deck, as we get to see key cards hit the discard pile here for Kyle's deck. Of course, you want to get as many unique Pokemon into your discard pile as possible so that you can use Perfection to its absolute maximum. And of course, you also want to get some Giratinas into your discard pile so that you can start using Distortion Door. So many different cards you want to get into your discard pile, and there just aren't enough of them. So what are you going to do? Instead, you're just going to play a second Battle Compressor.
Yeah, something kind of interesting on Hunter's side. He did have a Floatstone on that Noibat before it got Field Blowered. He could have potentially retreated into the Garchomp and Giratina tag team to avoid getting that Distortion Doored on the bench. That will place a damage counter, which could allow Kyle to pick up a knockout with a big Calamitous Slash later on. But I think the reasoning for that is that, you know, he runs the risk of sending that active, and then Kyle's able to just attack it for a lot more damage right away with a Mewtwo and Mew copying one of these powerful attacks from the discard pile.
All right, so now it seems like the action's starting to slow down a tiny bit. We see Kyle look through his deck very calmly. The first Battle Compressor was an obvious one. The second one, that's where you really have to start making some decisions. Which supporters do you want to have in your discard pile so that you can have better access to them through your Versus Seekers? Which Pokemon are you absolutely going to need in your discard pile as soon as possible so that you can use them with perfection, with the Perfection ability? So that Mewtwo and Mew can use the attack. There's a lot of things you want to consider when playing these Battle Compressors, but the good news is that he had access to 2 Battle Compressors compressors at the start of his turn, and that was just huge for him. Now, he does have to set up for only 3 cards, which is never really what you want to be doing. If you're going to be playing this liability in the Shaman EX, you want to be drawing as many cards as possible. And now we see a Versus Seeker for an N, so it's, anything you can do, I can do better, it says Kyle, is now both players will be shuffling their hands back into their decks and drawing 6 new cards apiece.
Yeah, I think Kyle actually prized a good amount of his tech Pokemon that he'd like to get down right away in the discard pile. Things like that Damage Change Mewtwo I noticed was in there, as well as that Alolan Marowak. Marowak might not be as good in this instance since Noibat, I believe, does have 60 HP, so won't be knocked out right away by a Lost Boomerang. But I think the big thing for Kyle here, if he wants to get an attack off, he's going to need to find a Floatstone. Giratina has a pretty massive 3 retreat cost, so he'd need to find not only a Floatstone, but also a Mewtwo and an Energy.
So, will Hunter actually notice that there's going to be some major players prized in Kyle's deck? Like, that's really another thing that you have to kind of play around, is you have to expect certain attacks to come out of Kyle's deck, and if he doesn't have access to them, then you kind of play it around something that you weren't going to have to potentially play around. So there's a lot of things that really happen in these intricate little battles that these players are having amongst each other. Yeah, and I do actually believe that Garchomp and Giratina might have been prized as well for Kyle. We haven't seen it hit the discard yet. Kyle setting up for 5 new cards. A huge setup here for Kyle. As it looked like his hand was drawing thin. It really wasn't providing any resources, but now will these 5 new cards help him out? Yeah, he's really, like we said, digging for that Floatstone here to even get off and attack this turn. Most of these lists are playing just 1, maybe 2 copies of the card, so it's not super likely that you'd be able to find it, and I don't think I see it in his hand right now. There's Distortion Door, 2 damage counters placed, 1 on each benched Pokemon here for Hunter. Yeah, and this is big damage, or important damage, I should say. Will allow Kyle to use Calamitous Slash at some point, as long as it's not in the prize cards, but we do believe it was over there. So later on, if he does grab it, that does set up numbers for him to be able to pick up this KO. Ooh, but gaining some HP. Yeah. No kidding. There's a Fighting Fury belt there. That's 40 hit points that you get additionally added to your Pokemon here of your Hunter. Now, Noibat getting a Double Dragon Energy attached to it. Yeah, we could definitely see a Distort here on Hunter's side. I think he knows that basically the only ways Kyle has to move this Giratina is Floatstone. So Distort could lock this up for a turn or two, let him get some, more Pokemon in play, get his setup going a little more how he would like it. Also, another way Kyle could move this Giratina, I guess, is also the AZ, but I believe he discarded it off of a Battle Compressor. So now the only way to access it is via Seeker, which is also an item card. Yeah. Well, third N in as many turns. It looks like we're doing it all over again. Both players shuffling their hands back into their decks and drawing 6 new cards. It's a different battle than what we saw last round, right? Last round we saw fast, furious, insane amounts of damage, lots of action in very few turns. We saw that the game 1 was already over at this point, Right. And now we're seeing kind of like a calm, collected version of these of the expanded format, as now Hunter and Kyle are just not necessarily getting off the ground running yet, but we're sure they're setting up major turns coming into these following couple of turns. Right, and Computer Search from Hunter will allow him to grab any card he would like to out of his deck. Looks like Field Blower is going to be an option for him there. And there's a Noivern GX. The Noivern using that Distort. So that Noivern GX does come down. We talked about it while we were looking at through PTCGO. We see how it can really distort and disrupt your opponents from really using their game plans. You're not going to have access to Versus Seekers, Ultra Balls, or any other powerful item cards in your deck as long as that Distort is the attack of choice here for Hunter. The only way Kyle really would have to move this right now would be a Guzma, but I'm not sure that he'd actually be able to really even do too much with that Garchomp and Giratina not being something he has access to. He could, clean up his bench a little bit with a Despair Ray from the Mega Gardevoir. That could be a good option here to just get some damage in play as well. And he is attaching to that Mewtwo and Mew, and it looks like he does indeed have that Guzma in his hand. There's that Guzma. Guzma is going to promote Hunter's only Pokemon with with any sort of potential damage, major damage output here. And now we see the Mewtwo and Mew now finally start to come out and play. There's 2 energy now on the Mewtwo and Mew, and it looks like maybe it was a Distort of Kyle's own. Yeah, I think so. Trying to slow Hunter down a bit as well, saying anything you can do, I can do better. Distort right back at you. And here we see from Hunter, it looks like that Faba. I think this is a big card for him in this matchup. So where does Faba really shine here?
Yeah, well, I mean, Kyle's deck just revolves so much around special energy. If he can just continually limit Kyle's energy in play, there's really not much that Kyle could do to combat that, right? You need energies to be attacking. All of the energy in his deck are special energy.
Right, and when you don't have your Dimension Valley in play,
right,
it really, really limits your options here if you are Kyle. So Hunter potentially going to be just using Distort here, and it looks like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and he's actually choosing not to play the Faba, just holding off on that for now. Kind of just wants to maybe be a little more reactive to what Kyle gets moving on his turn.
Interesting choice, right?
Yeah, a little bit, but I don't know that... I mean, he needs another energy if he wanted to Calamitous Slash, and so he's not quite there yet. He needs to find that one more energy. And I think we're kind of in a situation here where these players are just using this Distort item-locking attack against one another, and it's really slowing them both down. I mean, Hunter doesn't have much going on in his hand. We see Kyle has an Ultra Ball, but can't use it thanks to Distort. I believe a Professor Sycamore is in his hand as well.
Right. I mean, the reality, though, is that it seems like Kyle has the potential to really just take control of this game here, right? When Hunter chose not to use the Faba, that means you cannot play the Ultra Ball here, I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't believe that Kyle, unless a different...
Was there something else?
Oh, he used Linear Attack, of course, with the Garchomp and Giratina, not a Distort.
Yeah, of course, the Noivern GX in the bench. Of course that's what happened.
So, yeah, that Noivern got sent to the back. Linear Attack still did 50 damage thanks to that Fighting Fury belt attached. So, Ultra Ball able to be played. It looks like he is going to grab that Mega Lopunny and Jigglypuff. Doing a solid amount of damage now thanks to the 3 GX Pokemon on Hunter's side. Jumping Balloon, of course, doing a base damage of 60 and then 60 more for each EX or GX on your opponent's side of the field.
Sounds like a knockout to me. If you can actually pull it off, and it looks like because of that Sycamore, you can.
Yeah, he has the Dimension Valley in his hand, which would be the other piece he needs. He's going to move the damage counter with Cursed Eyes from the Absol. Must have needed that extra damage counter to get there. Finds the Dimension Valley. I believe we will see this Garchomp and Giratina go down. And Kyle, using that Sycamore, does find a fresh hand.
So Garchomp and Giratina, like we said, it didn't have the damage output. It was forced to just linear attack, and that means that Mewtwo and Mew just has the rain. Really not using that Faba could potentially mean that Kyle could run away with game one here.
Yeah, and that was an exact knockout there. Needed that damage counter moved with the Absol, and Kyle does take the prize advantage. We'll see what Hunter can do to combat this. How is he going to hop back into this game? Looks like a Mysterious Treasure in his hand, so he can find another Garchomp and Giratina here. This deck in the standard format is typically playing things like Counter Gain, or Karate Belt, so I wonder if he has something like that. Oh, this is a big card actually coming down for Hunter.
Yeah, no kidding. Mimikyu here. Just a card that you expect to see in Standard, maybe not necessarily in Expanded, though, as Shadowbox really messes with Mewtwo and Mew here.
Yeah, Shadowbox says Pokemon GX that have any damage counters on them, both yours and your opponents have no abilities. So Mewtwo's Perfection, which is what makes it work, is not going to be active anymore, and Kyle's going to have to find another Mewtwo and Mew to attack with.
So, what does Kyle have that can counter that can really mess with Mimikyu here? Like, it seems like it's potentially like hard little lock form as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, with Kyle's bench,
given his hand,
yeah, and also his bench just being full, the only actual attacking option I guess he has would be Shaman, or I mean, he could put a bunch of Prism Energies on Giratina and use Shadow Impact. I doubt we would see that. So he's going to have to use AZ in order to pick up one of these Pokemon to get a clean Mewtwo and Mew in play that has no damage on it. On Hunter's side, actually using that Battle Compressor discards the Lightning Energies, and this is an interesting way that Hunter has to get that extra energy in play that Garchomp and Giratina needs. The Coco Prism Star.
And there's a Chaotic Swell. So there's another Distort here. We are starting to reestablish the lock.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think Hunter has too much more going on in his hand, but that Shadow Box on Mewtwo should slow Kyle down a good amount here. Like we said, he's going to be forced to play an AZ, I think, if he wants to be able to attack with anything this turn.
Yeah, well, I potentially see... Well, I see a large hand here for for Kyle. So he may have additional options. It looks like he's attaching onto the Mewtwo and Mew. Does he have like a stealthy? Well,
so he could have Stealthy Hood, but this here actually he can use Miraculous Duo GX on the Mewtwo and Mew.
Oh,
you can't use that Perfection ability, but there is still an attack printed on the card, and we see that is what Kyle went for. Going down to just one prize card remaining, Hunter Butler is going to need to top deck something real good here pretty soon if he wants to get back in this.
Hunter now draws a card after promoting the Shaman EX. Plays a Trainer's Mill. What do you get here? If you're Hunter, how many options do you have available to yourself when you're down 6 prizes to 1?
He finds a Roxy. We'll have to see if he has any Pokemon in his hand. Of course, Roxy does draw you cards. It is a draw supporter, but you have to discard a non-Pokemon GX or non-Pokemon EX from your hand in order to draw 3 for each you discard.
Right. So normally paired with Weezing in order to kind of get you the best of both worlds there between Weezing's ability and, of course, Roxy. But it seems like Hunter may just not have very many options available to him.
I think he does have 2 Weezings here in his hand, which is actually going to be about the perfect.
Got it.
Yeah, he didn't discard the Pokemon. I believe they're in his hand.
Got to discard the Weezings. Don't shuffle your hand. He has not discarded the Weezings yet from his hand. Okay, so just to let you guys know, Hunter Butler did play a Roxy here.
I believe Hunter used the Execute with the Propagation ability with the Roxy. He must have not wanted to get the damage spread with...
But he drew 6 cards, right?
Yeah, so if he has 2 Executes in the discard pile, he can discard both of them with Propagation. It might have just been one of those verbal things between the two players where Hunter says, okay, I'm going to Propagation, and just didn't pull them out of the discard pile. As we'll see him probably do the same thing here with this great catcher.
So then that would imply that he believes that the Weezing is going to be much stronger later on in the game for himself.
I think so, yeah. And he knows that he's kind of in a tough spot here, down 6-1 prizes. Going to need to find a way to claw back into this. I think Kyle does have a VS Seeker in his hand, and if that AZ is still down there. Yeah, and there's the Stealthy Hood as well.
There's that Stealthy Hood. I thought I saw it in his hand, but there it is. Definitely another way for him to really ignore the Mimikyu, and Hunter sees the writing on the wall, shuffles all of his cards back into his deck, basically implying a concession there as Kyle does go up 1-0 against Hunter Butler here, as we saw kind of just perfection doing what it does and just perfectly taking all 6 prizes against none from Hunter.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about this Mewtwo deck is that you just have so many answers. Even if you go up against an odd deck that you definitely did not expect to play against this weekend, you have the tools in your deck in order to counteract it. Of course, he was able to slow things down with that Distort early on. Also, the Stealthy Hood being able to counter the Shadow Box ability from the Mimikyu, I think was huge and honestly one of the keys of that game. Obviously, Kyle used that to take his last prize, so ended up being what he needed to close things out.
Stealthy Hood really is kind of an all-star for the Mewtwo and Mew Perfection deck. We didn't get a chance to talk about it too much while we were looking through the deck list, but really, there's a lot of ways for your opponent to try to shut down your abilities, right? But most of the time, Stealthy Hood is going to really prove to power through most of them and just kind of let you do the thing that you want to do, which is just use your Perfection ability to use the perfect attack at the right time.
Absolutely. Hunter here moving into this second game, probably going to try to see if he can make some adjustments. I think he definitely had a bit of an unfortunate hand there in the middle of that first game where it just really wasn't working with him. He didn't get any real draw supporters, wasn't able to do too much. We have seen Kyle has gone ahead and laid his prizes out, prizing that Absol, which ended up being a key part of that first game, not something he's going to have access to. Hunter here did take a mulligan, which means he'll have to find a basic Pokemon, and Kyle will get 1 additional card to start this game.
Yeah, so Hunter did not have any basic Pokemon in his hand. He has to shuffle it right back in and draw a brand new one. And he has to do that until he finds a basic Pokemon. Then Kyle gets to draw 1 additional card for each time he misses. So there is that 1 card. And now we see the prizes start to get laid out. The first thing I see is a Noibat and then a Mimikyu. The Mimikyu never going to be something you want to have prized in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely a big part. We saw it play a big role in the first game. Potentially trying to slow down what his opponent's trying to do. Also, another prize that could be really relevant was that Noibat. I'm not sure what Hunter's Noivern line is. Sometimes in these decks, I think we've seen some pretty thin ones, like a 1-1, maybe a 2-2. So
yeah, I have a pretty good idea that that was probably the only Noibat in his deck. So, well, right away, we start to see a turn 1 here out of Hunter as he attaches a Lightning Energy and then plays the Dene to Dede change, finding himself Battle Compressor to start really thinning his deck out. We have not seen Hunter's deck in action, at least not doing what it wants to do.
Yeah.
So we really want to see a different game out of Hunter here.
For sure. Getting that first energy attachment is going to be big since Calamitous Slash does require 3 energies. A much better start from Hunter already. Professor Sycamore, really what you want to be doing with these type of decks quickly and expanded, just drawing 7 as fast as possible, trying to get your ideal setup very, very quickly.
So now, what kind of a setup is Hunter going to start needing? Of course, he wants to start getting a potential Garchomp and Giratina going as fast as possible, but what does he just want to limit the amount of Pokemon he has in play in order to kind of avoid Mega Lopunny shenanigans?
Yeah, that was definitely a big part of that first game, Jumping Balloon being able to come in and pick up that first big KO on Kyle's side. I think that you're right. He's definitely going to be very mindful of how many GX Pokemon he puts in play. But a big card actually here for Hunter is going to be that Chaotic Swell. We did see Kyle was able to respond to it with the
Field Blower.
The Field Blower in the last game, but if Kyle does not find a Field Blower, he's not going to be able to use Dimension Valley, which we've talked about being so important.
So there is that Chaotic Swell you were just talking about. Hunter does not pass the turn before playing that. He knows how important that card is, especially when your opponent goes second on that first turn of the game. Now Kyle gets to go ahead to get going as we now see Hunter end his first turn. Remember, did limit the number of Pokemon he played. Really, Hunter is not the kind of Hunter's deck is not the kind of deck that you really want to get going extremely quickly with. You kind of just want to limit how much speed your opponent comes out with.
We are going to see Kyle use the Ultra Ball here as well. He's probably going to want to get a Mewtwo down quickly and looking for Field Blower as well. Like we said, Chaotic Swell going to be a big piece here. Also needs to find a Float Stone if he wants to move this Mewtwo. Mewtwo does have an attack it could use here on this first turn, Shatter Shot, doing 30 damage for each Psychic Energy attached to the Mewtwo. So not irrelevant damage by any means, just, you know, placing 30 on the Garchomp and Giratina actually does set it up to be able to be knocked out by a Calamitous Slash later on. So maybe we'll see Kyle go with that.
So yes and no, right? Like you're okay with doing Damage Shot, but then that kind of implies that you're not starting to power up your Mewtwo and Mew.
Right.
You're not doing anything to really progress your mid game. But at the same time, you know, it does set up, like you said, a Garchomp and Giratina knockout further down the road. It just kind of depends on the strength of your hand of your Kyle. If you can do something better, you definitely go for it. But if you can't, then using Mewtwo EX as first attack is not the end of the world. Not
the worst thing for sure. I think ideally he would rather be attacking with the Mewtwo and Mew. Even if he wanted to use Shatter Shot, he would rather be doing it with the Mewtwo and Mew because, like you said, getting that energy gets you closer to a Calamitous Slash later, gets you closer to a Jumping Balloon later on as well. And he is going to go ahead and attach to it.
So, yeah, it looks like he chooses to attach to the Mewtwo EX. So that is going to mean that's going to mean good news for Hunter if you're in Hunter's shoes. Because remember, there's Double Dragon Energy. That's a card that just really turns the tides of almost any game once it gets attached here. And sure enough, Kyle has to be aware of it. Now, a Battle Compressor from Kyle going to get some Pokemon into this discard pile. We saw how, despite having some pretty poor prizes, he still managed to find a very clean victory in Game 1. Yep. Kind of wants to avoid any kind of pressure from Hunter right now.
Has the Garchomp and Giratina this time, so he's going to be getting rid of that right away. Moving into this next turn, though, for Hunter, I mean, the Mewtwo does only have 170 HP. Calamitous Slash has a base of 160, but you have 2 ways to kind of get that extra damage counter. You can either use the Roxy to spread damage with a Weezing, or even getting a Fighting Fury Belt plus the Double Dragon would do it for him. And Hunter does have a pretty large hand after using Roxy last turn.
And I believe he also plays Giratina in his deck, right?
Right, but that would only hit the bench Pokemon, so he would need something like his own
Guzma,
Absol.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kyle still eyeing down potential options. Like we said, he chose to attach onto the Mewtwo EX, which means there's going to be no real mid-game progression out of Kyle's hand. And right away, we see a Fighting Fury Belt and a Double Dragon Energy.
Mysterious Treasure as well, going to discard that Execute. Hunter just signaling to the discard pile. Yep, using Propagation, going to discard it. Something I think Kyle could have done last turn that he chose not to do. He Dedenne away a couple of cards in his hand, but to Ultra Ball for the Dedenne, he discarded one of his Dimension Valleys. I think I really would have liked to have just seen him play the Dimension Valley. You know, you're going to discard it anyway from the Ultra Ball or the Dedenne. Might as well go ahead and throw it out there to get rid of this Chaotic Swell, force Hunter to find another one.
Yeah, perhaps some nerves there. Not letting him choose that. Or maybe he was hoping to go with a Field Blower Dimension Valley. Maybe he thought that he could potentially get a really big turn going if he took the risk. But either way, the Chaotic Swell still in play.
Yep.
And now we're starting to see Hunter really get going. I really like Hunter's style, by the way. He was waiting for Kyle to say pass and immediately drops both cards as fast as he possibly can onto the field, those Fighting Fury Belt and Double Dragon Energies. He knows that he's got a huge advantage in this game as he knocks out Kyle's Mewtwo EX with ease, does Hunter Butler, and Hunter now takes 2 prizes. Kyle still has 6 remaining, but more importantly, there are no energies in play here for Kyle.
Yeah, and I don't think Kyle's hand is very strong. He doesn't have any energies in play, and a lot of them are in his hand, I think. You know, you need energies to play the game and win the game, but you don't want too many of them at once. Looks like just the double colorless energy and that Prism, as well as a Mega Lopunny and Jigglypuff, a Guzma as well. We might be in Guzma stall territory where he's just going to have to try to buy turns by Guzmaing up this Dedenne.
That is never where you want to be, but it looks like that's the only option available here for Kyle, as Dedenne is going to be promoted here after a Guzma, and that forces the Giratina up as well. And now it seems like Kyle's kind of clinging on to the last bit of hope before we go to Game 3, but really Hunter's got he's got everything going, and Hunter really has basically absolute control of this game.
With the double colorless energy in Kyle's hand, though, he actually could just bench this Mega Lopunny and Jigglypuff and just attach to it. You don't have to copy it with Mewtwo and Mew to be attacking, right? You can just power it up manually. It does take a little longer since it doesn't get use of Dimension Valley. But actually, he's going to be attaching to Dedenne. Maybe he's going to have to set up a Static Shock or Tingly Return. Not where he wants to be.
Not what I expected out of Kyle there. And the thing about playing the Mega Lopunny is that then your opponent has absolute perfect information and he just plays accordingly. So it's not where you want to be, but at the same time, his hand just isn't giving him many options. Meanwhile, Hunter's hand just, I love to say it, a plethora of options. You know, there's so many options available here for Hunter that he really just has an embarrassment of riches and finds I believe, an Acerola here through that trainer's mail.
Yeah, this actually could be pretty good for him. He could pick up this Giratina and Garchomp as he does right away. I think he had already attached to the Guzzlord. Yeah, they're going to catch that right away. But he can put this Giratina and Garchomp right back down. He does have that Cocoa Prism in his hand like we saw earlier. Will bring up this Dedenne, gets that other energy in the discard pile, and now can use Dance of the Ancients to accelerate that extra energy. And the Naganadel and Guzzlord tag team can use Jet Pierce here, doing 190 damage to take the KO. It feels like two completely different games that we've seen so far in this set.
Well, that's one way to go about that turn. At this point, Kyle Warner has no option but to scoop up his cards, and that means we're going to Game 3. 2 very lopsided games, going one game apiece to both of these players, and now we're hoping to get a Game 3 that's just basically back and forth and really telling of how this matchup could potentially go, as neither player has really been able to fight back once their opponent got going.
Right. Something in that last turn for Hunter that, you know, might have seemed questionable. I think he did have 2 lightning energies in his discard pile, so you might be thinking, oh, why wouldn't he have benched that Garchomp and Giratina right away, use Dance the Ancients, and just get that extra energy back in play? And there's actually a reason that Hunter did that. He's playing around that Mega Lopunny that we mentioned. By keeping that Garchomp and Giratina out of play, it's less damage that Kyle can do with a jumping balloon. So really heads up from Hunter. He knew that this Guzzlord was going to probably put him in a very good position. Of course, 280 HP plus 40 more from the Fighting Fury Belt. 320 is not anything Kyle can hit for in one single turn. So Hunter definitely knew that that Guzzlord was safe, and even could have used its ability Violent Appetite if Kyle didn't hit it for too much to make it not even a 2-hit knockout. Might have forced it into 3-hit KO range. So moving into this third game, we'll have to see what Kyle can adjust for now after being losing this second game of the set.
So really, it's I don't know how much he has to adjust so much as just kind of has to hope that he doesn't get forced to attack with like things like Mewtwo EX, right? So your opponent has a very powerful strategy, but it's a very slow one. If you can disrupt him like you did game 1, and then just get a big one-hit KO onto, or get a big KO onto one of the big tag teams from Hunter, then we might see a repeat of what happened game 1. In reality, it really comes down to getting perfection online, and that's what happened game 1, and it's not what happened game 2. So now, it really does come down to opening hands, and of course, how much power these players can bring down as we start to see these prizes start to come out for both players. We see one Mewtwo, we see a Battle Compressor, and of course we see that Absol. A lot of like techie little cards here in Kyle's prizes.
Another big one here, the Garchomp and Giratina, of course. We haven't seen it play too big of a role in either of the games, honestly, but it's definitely something that could be really important for him.
Gotta love Calamitous Slash. We see how powerful that attack is in Game 2, and now we see some prizes come down here for Hunter as these players do shake hands and they begin Game 3, as now Kyle will be going first. We get to see the Mewtwo and Mew start the game off with an energy attached to it right away, so it's a very different game than we saw in the second game, and Hunter's going to have to play accordingly. And that is going to be the end of turn 1 here for Kyle, though, as no supporters or anything was played, as he was forced to pass after attaching that energy.
Right away, Hunter already knows what he wants to do, discards and execute with Battle Compressor. I feel like his Battle Compressor decisions are pretty thought out before he even goes into a game. Wants to discard, executes, wants to get lightning energies down as well. And we do see him opt to discard Roxy, maybe indicating that he could have a VS Seeker in his hand.
Now, the real question is Kyle playing Possum, or does he really have a really poor hand here? You know, if you only needed to get, say, one energy into play, then there was no need to play your only supporter in your hand, right? But if you did need additional resources, if you did need to start getting some Pokemon into your discard pile, for example, to take advantage of perfection, then you would have wanted to use that supporter in your hand if you have one. So maybe he doesn't. Maybe Kyle just really is going to be living off the top of his deck right now.
Yeah, I'm thinking Kyle probably would have loved to throw down a Professor Sycamore, even an N right there. I think it's just not much that he is working with. Hunter, on the other hand, is going to use that Roxy to draw 6 cards because he did discard the 2 execute with it. Throwing down an Ultra Ball, going to use Propagation to discard them. Actually going to discard a Lightning Energy and just 1 execute. And if he gets a Cocoa Prism Star, I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure he can't like just knock out the active this turn. He could use GG End. I think it has a colored requirement though, so it doesn't have a colorless attack cost, so I don't think GG End can be powered up with the Lightning Energy.
There's now a Battle Compressor, and yeah, you're not wrong. There's definitely the colored requirement right there, as GGN GX is shown on our screen. As we keep resolving this Battle Compressor, we see a couple of supporters already hit the discard pile here through the Battle Compressor, and now the trifecta as these 3 supporter cards hit the discard pile. Lots of options with Versus Seeker from here on out.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, we've talked about how powerful Battle Compressor here is in the expanded format, and part of that reason is just because VS Seeker is also in the format, right? You're able to play these kind of techie one-of supporters that you might not be able to find room for just because you can get access to them through VS Seeker much more easily.
There's that Double Dragon energy. I mean, if you're going to be taking advantage of Kyle's slow start, you're going to do it through Double Dragon energy for sure. And now Trainer's Mail going to find the Mysterious Treasure. And oh, wow. So Mysterious Treasure finds Mimikyu. So many things happening at once here for Hunter. He really wants to take this third game and give Kyle his first loss of the weekend and advance to 7-0 if he does so.
Yeah, and this is going to make it so that Kyle has to actually attack with a different Mewtwo and Mew now. Linear attack will just place 40 damage on it, but will not be able to attack unless he is able to find that Stealthy Hood we saw be such a key part of the first game.
And there's a Faba right away getting rid of that Double Dragon energy. A huge Faba, really, but the truth is he needs to get more cards into play. Just finding a Wobbuffet is not where you want to be. It seems like that's it.
Oh, man.
Just a pass.
Really has a nothing going on. You don't like to see that for sure. We'll see what Hunter can do to capitalize, though. I already see a Roxy in his hand. We also see a Weezing. We haven't seen him use Roxy plus Weezing at all yet this set. Every time he's used Roxy, it's just been with the Propagation Executes.
Really interesting, right?
Yeah, I think he's wanting to save them, kind of like we said in that first game. He was, hoping to save them for later turns. Obviously, the game ended up ending pretty quickly because Kyle conceded, wanting to, of course, make sure that there was time for a third game if it got to that. Hunter's only way to get a big attack off this turn of doing more than just 40 damage with linear attack would be with the Dance of the Ancients from Tapu Koko.
I think more than anything, what we're seeing is a mastery of the deck here from Hunter, as holding on to resources that most players wouldn't hold on to, and then really finding ways to get this aggression out when he needs to is kind of telling of why he is 6-0 right now, and potentially going to advance to 7-0 at the end of this game. As, like we said, Kyle just has nothing going for him, and Hunter, of course, seems to be only missing some energy. That seems to be about it.
Yeah, I think he's got, looks like that.
Speaking of energy, there it is.
Yep, double dragon energy right there. He's going to go ahead and throw that down. Dance of the Ancients gets the extra energy acceleration. One thing about this board that could be a little scary, I know that this is putting Hunter in a great spot theoretically, right? He's going to take the first 3 prizes. There are a ton of GX and EX Pokemon in play, so all Kyle really would need to do to respond to this would be to find, an Ultra Ball or a Battle Compressor with a VS Seeker or something like that in order to start drawing some more cards, and a Jumping Balloon with a DCE and Mewtwo could take this knockout right back.
It doesn't seem like he found anything, and he's forced to just bench another Pokemon and then pass the turn, as now Wobbuffet is the active Pokemon, kind of saying, oh man, this is not what I want to be doing right now, is Kyle, as now Hunter starts his turn. We already see 3 energy on his active Garchomp and Giratina Tag Team GX. Do we get to see more aggression come out of Hunter? Will he be able to kind of seal the deal here?
Oh, so Hunter used Propagation with Execute, but obviously can't do that with the Bide Barricade Wobbuffet active. So, I mean, pretty easy fix. He can just discard this Noivern that's in his hand. I don't think it's something he's going to be, utilizing at any point in this game. At this point, it's kind of swinging it into his favor for sure. He does have a couple double dragon energies. He's also got Great Catcher in his hand, so he could bring up this Mewtwo, but then you run the risk of getting the dreaded into one happening.
Well, really, it's a tale of 2 different situations here. Of course, Hunter just has access to pretty much every card in his deck that he might need, and he's just trying to find a way to seal this game up. Kyle, on the other hand, just trying to cling on to hope, trying to cling on to a couple additional turns, see if he can maybe turn the game around with one giant turn. Like you said before, there's so many GX and EX Pokemon in play that we will be able to see Kyle return a big knockout if he has the chance to. Hunter has to acknowledge that and kind of start setting up a secondary attacker in case that does happen. That's kind of what we're seeing out of both of these players. Will Hunter get a secondary attacker before Kyle can get a big turn? It looks like that may be the case, as now we see a Great Catcher bringing up that GX Pokemon. Wobbuffet hits the bench.
Yeah, I mean, and Hunter's just in a dominant position here. He's definitely looking like he's going to be able to close this one out. It's really going to come down to Kyle's
versus
top
Seeker.
Deck. Is there a supporter to copy or to grab? It's
technically
going to be
yes.
Faba, but I mean, he can get rid of the double dragon on the active, but I mean, all Hunter needs is to find one more or a Floatstone and a Lightning, and he does have Floatstone Lightning. He also has the double dragon.
So the handshake does happen. We see a very lopsided match, if we're being honest. It seems like it did go to 3, but it seems like neither player was really in any danger of losing the games that they won, as sometimes you just don't get going the way you want to get going, and you're forced to just kind of extend the hand and say, well, at least I'm 5-1-1 here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kyle's still in a super fine spot. Obviously, to make day 2 of these regional championships, you have to get to a record of 6-2-1. So at 5-1-1, he still needs to just win one more of these next couple rounds in order to lock up that spot. Exactly.
Right, but on the other end, we now have a Hunter who is at 7